Right, I think that's pretty much everyone in. We might have a couple of people kind of drifting in as we start, but thank you all so much for coming, and especially for joining us live, especially when it's so hot outside. We're really pleased to have you here. Just to let you know a couple of quick tech things before we all get started. Some of you have been here before, so you've heard me say this a couple of times, but you are all on mute for now. That's just so that we don't have 40 people talking over each other at the same time, but don't panic, plenty of time to ask questions. So if you do have any questions at any point, just pop them into the chat function and we will kind of come to you as quickly as we can. And just quickly before we start, to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Cision, who are very kindly making these sessions possible with their Zoom accounts and help. So we'll kick straight off so we get as much time as possible in this hour. So I will pass over to you, Susan, and as I say, everyone, please do put any questions in the chat because we want to speak to as many of you as possible and make it interactive. So yeah, over to you, Susan.
Okay, so hi, thank you very much. Probably going to be hottest day of the year, but very nice that you've found the time to join us. I've wanted to talk about, the dreadful times we're going through at the moment and the way that freelancers have been badly hit as a profession, really, with this sort of stalemate that's been going on in the last 3 months. And it's really nice to see that quite a few people I know and have worked with before are listening. I hope your expectations aren't so huge that you think I'm going to give you a job by this evening, because that's not going to happen. But I want to address the sorts of things that people ask me all the time when I'm coaching and when I'm teaching. And most of it is, it has a common theme in terms of confidence and of course imposter syndrome. But the interesting thing is that everybody has different ambitions and goals and needs, and you'd think that it would all be pretty similar, but it isn't. So what I wanted to say was that if you had said sort of a year ago, what's the worst thing that could happen in your freelance life? I mean, the answer would possibly be that, the editor that you depended on had left, or, the magazine you were writing for had folded, or perhaps if you've got kids, that you couldn't get away for sports day because you had a deadline, or that you haven't been paid and you were waiting 3 months. And those were the worst things that could happen, and we didn't like it at all. So imagine 3 months on, 4 months on, not only have all the worst things happened, but things that we couldn't possibly have imagined had happened. And, just even thinking of those of you who've got kids at home, homeschooling, or partners at home sitting at your desk, or all the other things that are holding you up and changing your life forever. I can't begin to imagine how debilitating that is in terms of thinking about your own work, your own survival. So what I'm going to look at is really what we can do about it, and whether that means changing completely or riding it out, or I like to think about it as sort of rebooting, thinking about the situation objectively, and how could anyone really be expected to go back to what they were doing and work in the same way with the same proactive enthusiasm and passion when we're in survival mode. And that's what it is. We have entered a phase that we've never, ever considered before. And it's almost, too difficult to plan the day, let alone plan who you're going to write for, who you're going to pitch to, where does your idea come from, and all the sorts of things that we were used to. So in a way, we've sort of, we used to say we get stuck now and again. It's a phrase that writers use the whole time. But we're just frozen. We're not stuck. We're completely frozen because there doesn't seem to be any way out. Especially if the sources that you've relied upon have dried up. Editors have been furloughed themselves, magazines have folded, and I really do believe that freelancers have taken a direct hit, and it is a really hard situation from which, to bounce back from. But that is the only negative thing I'm going to say, because I want to look at what we can do, and the actual facts of it, which are that it's all change. And that's the basic bottom line. Nothing is the same. And so there's no point in us working in the same way or thinking about succeeding and moving ourselves forward in the way we're used to. But it's not just you, the writer, who has to do things differently. Everybody has to do things differently. The writer has got to think about what magazines are out there, how to find interesting stories, who to pitch to. But the industry has to think about survival. The industry are the people who are battling with budgets and advertisers and not being able to clearly see the way forward. So there are really two sides to this story. There is the one side where you've got whole publishing houses collapsing, like Bauer in Australia, and ceasing print editions like Lonely Planet and perhaps going to digital. And then you've got your editor who is suddenly caught like a frozen rabbit and doesn't know what to put in the next issue of a magazine, has to ditch everything that's been commissioned in the last 6 months, and has to think about reassuring the reader, entertaining them, inspiring them, and informing them about what's going to be happening. And of course, nobody knows what's going to be happening. So there are a lot of people in this boat, apart from the freelance. But without the freelance, the boat would sink. And that is a fact, because all of those publishers, all of those editors, all of those publications depend on freelancers. And without them, they can't, publish at all. So I'm less worried about you, in a way, than I'm worried about them. Because you, if you are used to being a journalist and you have the skills that have proved so far that you're a good journalist, in as much as you've been published in the past, it doesn't really matter what's happening now at the minute, if you can look back and think to yourself, well, I certainly can do it because I have done it, but now I've got to rethink of how I'm going to move that stuff forward. So let's just split it a little bit into the publishers and what's available, and you, what you can do about it. So if I start with the publishers, I don't know if you know the small independent publishing subscription service called Stack Magazines. That's just like STACK. But it's a great source of all the new magazines and less new, but hopefully still going to survive magazines that are sort of independent, and a whole sort of slew of them have come onto the bookstores, if you like, in the last year. And rather surprisingly, they've launched a little sort of movement called quarantine publishing, which I couldn't believe. But there are publishers and magazines that have just started to print in a time like this. Whereas we're all thinking, oh, it's awful, they're all folding and everything else. They're not. So have you read Batshit Times, for example? Okay, Batshit Times is a new magazine where the mind goes when the body is locked inside. Congratulations, whoever started Batshit Times. I think it's rather brilliant. But if we look at independent magazines, there will be entrepreneurs out there who think, right, now is the time to get a particular sort of audience and to start engaging with people, giving them reassurance, giving them inspiration. So that makes a bit of sense, providing, of course, they've got the money. And then there are the established publishers who are doing new things, like Bloomberg has launched a green magazine. So clearly climate change and sustainability are things that publishers find are important moving forward. So for Bloomberg to launch Green Magazine, that should be opportunities for quite a few of you who write about issues that are important like that. Even CN Traveller, Condé Nast Traveller, has appointed a sustainability editor. So if they've appointed a sustainability editor, maybe you could be a sustainability editor and offer your services to another publication. So there are magazines out there that are ones we don't know about. And all too often when I'm teaching or coaching, people will say, I want to contribute to The Guardian. And I say, yes, right, okay. And actually quite a few of them manage to, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of other magazines out there. I don't know if you know, but I run the Facebook group called Journo Answers, which I've done for about 5 years now. And I've got 3,800 members. And I don't let anyone in unless they can answer the question, where have you been published in the last year? So I have a wonderful sort of read of what they say. And I suppose 60% of the time, I have never heard of the publications they say they've been published in. That doesn't mean they haven't been published in them and have made them up, because I then check them out. But there are publications I've never heard of, with perfectly decent circulations, all sorts of interesting topics covered. And it just makes me think there is a huge market out there. And some of us are very sort of rigid in who we work for. So where are these huge number of titles that we don't know about? So as I mentioned just now, Stack Magazines is a good place to start. It's just because it's a subscription service, if you go online, you can see all sorts of titles that you've never heard of, and you might look at it and think, that might take my story. So how many of these have you heard of? Have you heard of Deck Magazine, D-E-K? It's about forgotten art. Elephant, Broccoli, Delayed Gratification, which has been around for a bit, The Critic, which is a new one on politics, art and literature, Sidetracked, which is a field magazine, Undark, Animal Welfare, Happyful and Breathe, and Soft Punk and Crack. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm saying start thinking about publications you don't know, because it doesn't really matter if you don't know the editor, as long as you know the publication, because the editor buys ideas, not you. And that's one of the things that most of my freelancers say to me. Oh, I've never, editors don't know me. I haven't written enough before. I'm at the beginning of my career. How am I going to, impress them? Well, the way you're going to impress them is to come up with a good idea. And only then will they think, who is this person? Can I trust them? Can I rely on them? Can they reassure me that they're good at research, that they've, got a head for figures or whatever it is. So that is really what's happening now, is that individual freelancers need to rethink where they're coming from and research where they're going to. And I think if you can crack on the head your idea perhaps that you don't have the confidence to do something and that you're not the best person to do it, by considering an idea and it being something that you've researched and you've got some unique angle on that story, there's no reason why an editor shouldn't be interested in hearing about it. And that hasn't changed. So COVID hasn't changed that sort of thought process, if you like. So you start with a foundation. You've been published before. I'm assuming most of you have been published before. And you have qualities that enable you to call yourself a journalist. And so you've got to start back at the beginning. You've got to build that wall again. Trump wall, got to build it again. So start with the foundations. Your foundations are that you're curious, you're intrepid, you're inventive, and you've got things you're interested in. Now, all you have to do is start making it look different in terms of who you're telling. So it's who you're telling about the things that you can do, rather than relying on the people that came to you before, or the small band of regular publishers that you would approach. So you possibly need to backtrack in time and think to yourself, okay, so what was I doing when I got my first commissions? What happened for me to be able to get published and to get an editor to be interested in my idea? And to really focus and think back to those times and think about what it was that got you into the publications. And those skills people forget. They just forget. They say we can't do it, or nobody's going to listen. But in fact, you can do it because you've done it. So I'm suggesting that one of the things that you do is to keep abreast with absolutely everything in your field. You listen to the news, of course. You listen to programs that you're regularly listening to, of course. But now start listening to podcasts. Start listening to what editors want. Start going to webinars and conferences and engaging in the conversation out there to see what actually is working. So nothing has changed in terms of what you put in your story. You're still going to have to find experts to quote. You're still going to have to find case studies. to illustrate your subject. Started the hedge. And so nothing has changed from that point of view. I'm going to put this in, right? So you don't, could you
We're
hear?
all good, we can hear you, we're great, it's all great.
All right, but if you can't, I'll take it out. So anyway, so there is something that's slightly odd, which makes people a little bit less able to sell themselves, if you like, because before COVID, we made a bit of an effort. You know, most freelancers, okay, hung around at home a lot of the day, okay. But when you did go out, you dressed up a bit, you had your smart clothes, you did your hair, you did your makeup, whatever. You networked, you met editors for drinks, you went to a PR event or whatever else. So you were out there. There's nothing less inspiring than, sort of spending the whole day in your pajamas. You just can't get it together. And I can remember Jenny Murray of Woman's Hour saying to me, well, actually, she said it to a whole group of people many years ago. And she was talking about selling herself, selling a story. And she said the only way she could ever pitch to an editor was naked on the phone. And I'm thinking, God, times have changed, haven't they? Because I don't think she wants to do that anymore. But it's the same thing. We're dressed in sort of our pajamas, and many of you on your bottom half have still got your pajamas. I've got a dress on. It's the first time for a long time that I put a dress on. But we need to now think about ourselves a bit more positively and start considering who is the person that is not the person that stays at home and does the homeschooling and thinks what's for dinner and arranges everything else. You've got to have two different sort of modes, if you like. One is your work mode and one is your home mode, even if you're at home for most of the time. And one of my clients this week said their children, who the woman is homeschooling, won't call her mum during homeschool time. They call her Miss Amanda, because they said they can't cope with the fact that she's mum at tea time and breakfast time, and they don't take her seriously when she's the teacher, so they call her Miss Amanda during school time. And I think you have to have that sort of attitude a bit when you're contacting an editor, that you're in your work mode. So let's sum up a bit. Identify what's stopping you moving forward. Could be time management. That's a really big one. You've got all sorts of distractions now. So there are ways to think about your time, allocating perhaps some time, diarising when you're going to do certain things. Time management is more important now than it's ever been before. And everything is moving so fast that it's no use saying, I'll do it tomorrow. Because as we all know, if it's a news story, we may not be news journalists working from home, but unless we react pretty quickly to something we hear or see, another freelancer will get to explore that as a feature. So speed is of the essence, which means that it's important to be in a position where you can receive lots of information almost at the same time as the news desks do. So how many of you, for example, are subscribed to newsletters and news aggregators like Medical News Today or the British Psychological Society's regular newsletter with interesting stories on it? There are so many different things you can subscribe to, or perhaps a university that's doing research in your area. Keep looking at their news pages so that you can come up with something original. Or if you go to a conference online, you might be able to quote straight away the expert that's spoken at the conference and use that as your hook for your story. So switch off and reboot. I'm going to give you 6 steps to do that, and then we'll open it to questions. The first step is to be honest. We're very used to hiding behind, I don't know, success or something. And I'm suggesting that you actually be honest, and we're all doing that now. We're saying we can't speak because the child needs this, or we can't do this because you've got to do that. All of a sudden, we're being a lot more honest. And I think it helps because I think it endears you to people. It's not like you've got to hide and sort of be all formal and proper and whatever else. So be honest. Engage in social media maybe a lot more than some of you have. I know most of you may be on Twitter, but are you engaging with news stories? Are you engaging with editors? Are you posting up your blogs? And are you using Twitter for things like lists? So for example, all the editors on all the publications you could possibly think of are on Twitter. You just put money editor into the search box on Twitter and up will come Money Editor, Good Housekeeping, Money Editor, Guardian, Money Editor, The Times, and it will just go through. So it's a good thing in the search box just to put the sort of tag of the title of the editor. Also look on lists. So if you look, for example, at The Guardian, just on their Twitter page, and then you go to lists and click on it, every single editor on The Guardian is on lists. So is the FT, so is The Times. All of them are there. And so it isn't that hard to start thinking about, you know, how am I going to find the editors that I need? So the next thing is, now you've got your editor, how do you know what the editor wants? Well, there's nothing sort of wrong with actually asking, though I would never ask blank saying, what do you need? I would say, here are my ideas. If you don't need them, is there something similar or something? So at least give them something to work on. And use things like media kits of publications and publishers. The media kit is designed for the advertiser, but in it you will find special supplements, forward features, even contributor guidelines. And that will give you a good idea of what editors want. I mean, if you look, for example, at The Atlantic, contributors guidelines are very clear on that. And yesterday, I can't remember who it was. It was a huge contributors guidelines, which was so helpful. So look for them, and they're usually there because it'll tell you which sections are looking for stories and who to pitch into.
I used to be like a woman on a mentions meeting.
Somebody's talking.
Oh, let me investigate. It must be someone with their mic off. There we are.
I can hear. Okay, so the next thing is go back to basics. What is your expertise? A lot of people are good at doing a lot of things, and that's what a good journalist can do, report. But in these days of looking for a niche or trying to explore and expand a bit, I think go back to what it is you know most about, what it is that you're most passionate about, what it is that interests you most, and then be proactive and see if a particular publication is doing a special supplement in January or whatever. You can say before they even start commissioning it out, oh, that's my area of expertise. Would you like me to do that? So you need to be quite proactive about that. And when you do your pitching, which I know you've had lots of talks about, be sure that you brag. You must tell the editor the best stuff about yourself. There's no point in holding back. I had a client just this week who said she was thinking about writing stories about cultural differences to COVID, and she was talking about Iran and she was talking about Greece, and then she read her pitch and I said, but you don't mention that you're married to an Iranian and you lived in Greece, and that you've got a PhD in communication skills and cultural studies. Oh, she said, is that interesting? You know, you have to put it all in because otherwise the editor just doesn't know. Right, so I've already said listen, read, podcasts, and one of my favourites is one I mentioned to Hilly right at the beginning, was Resurrect Old Stories. So some of us are so old we're getting round to the 10th version of the story we wrote on X, you know, in 1999 for whoever it was, because all we do is put a new hook on it. We find something in the news that a survey, a celebrity that's, you know, brings up that subject, and you think, yeah, I've got a folder full of stuff I shoved in about that subject. Resurrect it. Start thinking about how you can reapproach and redesign, reframe with new experts and new facts the subject that you already know a bit about. And then don't forget corporate. The corporate world has a whole stack of magazines that some people are very familiar with and work quite a lot for, and others sort of think they're advertising and aren't quite sure where it sits. So if you look at the CMA.com, the Content Marketing Association, that's the body to which publishers belong to, who have a whole sort of list of magazines under their belt, like Redwood Publishing, John Brown Citrus, I've gone off the top of my head, but there are about 300 of them. And they all have magazines they produce for clients. So if you look on the CMA site, you'll see clients who, of course, in this mid-COVID or beginning to end COVID time, are more than ever keen to increase loyalty with their brands. and you don't need to lose your integrity in order to write for a customer magazine, because in fact that's what they want, a journalist with sort of status and recognition to write articles. They don't promote the brand, they cover the subject. Just one last thing about case studies. In this time, a lot of you have had personal experiences that you want to write about, and that's absolutely fine. And of course, millions of people can engage with that. But I would just want to add one thing. If you've had a personal experience, make yourself the case study in that experience, not the subject of that experience. So think what your experience is about. Is it about loneliness? Is it about isolation? Is it about parenting? Is it about homeschooling? Is it about religion? Is it about culture? On and on and on. But you are the example within the story. So the story you're selling could go to Happyful or Breathe or Peck or Huck or Hug or Broccoli or whatever else it is, because it's a topic and you're just an example and a case study within that topic. So I really do believe there's no shortage of work for well-researched independent writers. I think that the best freelancers still are the ones who are proactive, persistent, and personally unaffected by rejections because they know they're nothing to do with them. It's outside their control. But editors by ideas, not people. And the best that you can do is what you do best. Research, keep your ears to the ground, and move fast. Nothing has changed. That has always been the case. And that's my little bit of information about what I think about the situation at the moment, and I'm open to questions.
Amazing. So we've got a good couple of people lined up because we had a lot in advance. So we'll get started with getting through as many as possible. But if you do have anything else, do pop it in the chat and we will try and get through as many as possible. So we will go first to, I had a question from Leda Reynolds. I'm just going to unmute you now. You should be able to speak. Do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, hi Susan. Hi, it's Leda actually. But,
apologies, my bad.
Hi.
I've been called so many things you can imagine. Really interesting, Susan. Thank you. It's really inspirational. Just a question. Do you think ageism is endemic in journalism?
I hope so. I hope lots of older people get published. Yeah, I think the older you are, the wiser you are, the more capable you are of writing about different things to see from different perspectives. And I don't think an editor has, I think if you're a staffer, ageism might come into it if the bosses are younger than you are, perhaps. But I'm sort of talking freelancers in this talk. And I would say that, like I've said before, that if you've got a good idea, it doesn't really matter what age you are. So I don't like to hear that really, and I don't think the answer's yes.
Okay, that's good. I feel a bit old at the moment with lockdown,
Right,
and especially my hair, my roots, and there's a lot of stuff for younger journalists. I just think, I feel a bit creaky. So yeah, it's encouraging what you said. So thank you.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I'm very old.
Not at all.
Amazing. Would you have any specific tips, I guess, if someone is feeling that way, or do you think it is just a case of continuing to put yourself out there and not doubting yourself?
Oh my goodness, there's so much about ageism, about isolation, about older people, about rights, about, everything. It's a fantastic time to be older and to be able to reflect on stuff that's going on in society. There is a huge population that still reads, still does things, as we saw when, Boris started talking about shielding and isolating, and over 50s and 60s and 70s, everybody stood up and said no. It was as simple as that. No, I don't think there's an issue.
Amazing.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, we're going to go to who have we got next on our list? Liz Hollis. I'm going to unmute you now. Hopefully you should be able to speak in a second.
Hi, Liz.
Oh, it's not unmuting your mic. Right, I'll ask this one for you because I think we've got... oh no, hang on. You should be able to speak now. Do you want to give it a go, Liz?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi. Yes. Just wondering, when you're rebooting and it's all speculative and sort of amorphous and how long is a piece of string, have you got any tips? Because I'm used to working to a deadline and sitting down. I have a kind of, that's much easier. But when it's in a sort of unending, nebulous task, have you got any tips on kind of how you manage that and avoid procrastination, especially now when there's so much to get distracted by, looking at YouTube videos about coronavirus, and time management?
Yes, there's lots of bits to that question. Getting distracted has to be, you've got to give yourself and find yourself a time where other people do not distract you. There's nothing else you can do. You can just say, this is my time between 3 and 4 in the cupboard, nobody come in. That's the only thing I can think of in terms of not being distracted, if you're talking about being distracted come from home. In terms of deadlines, freelancers are used to giving themselves deadlines. It's something that you learn to do. I personally have always used a diary and sort of put a mark on a date and said, this will be finished by then. I know it takes a lot of self-control, if you like, to do that, but there will be editors who give you a deadline. I think it starts with your attitude to work coming in. There are some of us who don't do things till the last minute, and there are some of us who do them as they come in. You'll know what sort of person you are. I think you just need to ask for deadlines if you want one. But if you're talking about speculatively, which you were, say you want to research a topic and you're not quite sure how long it's going to take, I would also consider how long it is going to take, and the point at which you say, right, if I'm only going to be paid £250 for this story, and I haven't even started writing it yet, and I've been researching it for a week and a half, I'm not sure it's going to be cost effective. And literally put the pen down and say, this is not going to work, it's not going to pay me anything. Or is this story so important in my career that I'm prepared to spend 3 weeks, 3 months, and it might turn into a book, or it may get me to a place that I want to go to. So I think it's thinking through what your objectives are for the work that you're doing, and setting yourself outcomes and goals as well as tasks. Does that help?
That's great, thanks.
Okay.
Amazing. Right, we had an anonymous question in as well, which I think you'd marked down that you wanted to answer. So I'll kind of read this one out. But it was basically around how to strike that balance between selling out, so writing well-paid corporate things with that kind of idea of following your dreams, and especially in that current climate. So just whether you had any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I was trained at WiJ magazines. I worked for Consumers Association for 7 years on the staff before I became freelance. And God, was I snooty and, whatever when I left. Because as far as we were concerned, when we went and wrote features for Holiday WiJ, Travel WiJ, you couldn't accept a Coca-Cola from a tour operator. Now we know that you can't actually write anything for the travel pages without really working with the industry in order to not have the trip cost you, 10 times what you're going to be paid. So I learned quite quickly when I started freelancing to maintain my own integrity. In other words, decide where I thought I was writing about something I didn't believe in, and where I thought I was being allowed to write independently my views or facts on a subject which helped people make decisions. And it became quite easy. There was a point in my career where I was an editor at Redwood Publishing, and that was very much client-based, and I was editing the AA magazine for the cars, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. A, I drive an old car with crisp packets in it. Why have they asked me to be editor? And B, I'm not going to sort of sell, one brand over another. I really don't care. But what I realized was that all they wanted was a lifestyle magazine and an editor who could communicate to people who bought cars. And that didn't compromise me at all. So that's how I managed to, convince myself, if you like, that I wasn't selling myself. I wasn't writing about something that I didn't believe in. And I think the balance is, it's money as well. You could say to yourself, right, I'll spend a day doing something which is a bit below me, beneath me, something I don't really care about. but it will pay me better than the 4 days a week that I'm doing somewhere else. And you may decide that that's important to you at the moment. But it's your call, really. And I think we're all perfectly capable of our own editorial discretion. And if somebody goes, you know, I don't want to get into it because then we'll start talking about the Daily Mail, and I don't want to do that.
No, that's good advice though. I think you very often, I think you do know yourself already what you're comfortable with doing. So it's about having that conversation with yourself and deciding what you want to do. Right. We'll go to, where should we go next? Emma Levine, one of the two. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to ask you all how to pronounce your names in advance. Let's see if we can unmute you. Oh, there we are. I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Emma.
Hey,
Yes.
Susan, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I know Emma for many, 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 many years.
Yes.
Emma is a brilliant journalist.
Oh, that's really nice to hear.
You are a brilliant journalist. But we all have to make money doing it. And therefore, sometimes we get to a place where we think, okay, maybe I'll make more money. And your question was about copywriting and things like that by doing another sort of branch of journalism. That's, you know, the thing is, it's fine. It's like dressing up. It's like saying, okay, most of the time, you know, I wear black skirts, black tops and whatever, but just occasionally I'll be a bit flamboyant and I'll wear this and do something different. That's the same with your career as a journalist. There are so many strands to it. If copywriting is something that you find yourself good at, you know, why not sell a jingle? Why not, you know, write about whatever it is? I think your question was more about, was it, I'm not sure, finding the work, or was it about actually doing it, Emma?
Tips on getting into it, really. I mean, I've done kind of bits of copywriting for sort of hotel industry things via one agency I worked for, but just kind of tips on how best to find that sort of work, which is obviously a different type from editorial completely.
Yeah, well, I think you said the word agency, and I think you said several words in that conversation, which were hotel, done it, copywriting from an agency. So you find an agency, the one you found, specialized in hotels, but since you're good at it, there are umpteen hotel groups, chains, you know, all sorts of marketing departments in the hospitality industry that, given you've already got the expertise of writing about hotels for one agency, just transfer to another provider. I wouldn't say start going, you know, to another subject and thinking about how to copyright for them. I would say to all of you, keep on to the stuff that you have got experience in. And when you found the agency that gave you the work for that particular hotel group or whatever else it is, there are umpteen other agencies that you can just look up, copywriting agencies. Then look who their clients are. And if they're in the hospitality industry, perhaps go for them rather than dog food, you know, which you don't know as well as the hospitality industry. But there are also copywriting courses. You know, journalism.co.uk have got some terrific courses. Don't know why I'm promoting them, but anyway, on all sorts of things like subbing and copywriting, and PMA and other organisations. I think what I didn't mention was get up your skills sometimes. So in this time, it may be a good time to do some of those online courses to up skills for copywriting or subbing or whatever else you want. But yeah, Emma, keep going as you do.
Absolutely. And we've had a quick question in the chat actually, because it feels like, Emma, you've kind of maybe got a bit of experience in this, so it's kind of a case of keeping going. But other than upskilling, is there any advice you might give to people who haven't branched out into copywriting before, but are thinking that might be for them? Is there anything else you would advise them to do to try and get into that area?
Do you want Emma or me?
You.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I don't really know is the answer, but I approach all these questions in the same way, is that there are people out there running courses. As long as the organization is, you know, bona fide and does things on a regular basis, I think you should go on those courses and look at the agencies. But when you think of the word copywriting, it's a sort of odd word, because a lot of the stuff that many journalists do is sort of copywriting, content writing, writing differently from doing an investigative piece for The Guardian. You can label it if you like. I think the only difference between copywriting and the writing that Emma is talking about is the knowledge that you need on search engine optimization. So I think that's the skill that you need to get familiar with. And once you've got that, your own research ability and writing ability will enable you to do it. So that's the bit that a lot of journalists perhaps don't have.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you. Right, we're going to go to a question which was again submitted in advance from Juliet Ricks. You should be able to talk now. Hopefully we can hear you.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Juliet.
Good to see you.
And you too. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, as a freelance, you may have plenty of experience freelancing, but what about getting into or back into editing or commissioning editing, that sort of work?
Yeah, I think I know you've been an editor before you were freelancing anyway, so you've got
kind of.
Yeah, but you've got the skills. I suppose you're asking me if you have the skills. I'm saying if you don't have the skills already, then it's difficult to go into a job and say, look, I can be the editor. The editor role is complicated. It could be budgeting and no writing. It could be marketing and no writing. It could be doing the layouts and the advertising and no writing. Or it could be writing the whole damn thing and, commissioning out. So there's a lot of different things that come under the label of being the editor. But I hear what you're saying, given for you, perhaps, that there's less freelance work out there that you would like. I'm
sorry. I'm quite happy writing. I'm doing quite a lot of it, but
yeah.
I just would quite like to get back to doing some editing. And yes, I do have the skills.
Okay.
But what I don't have as much is the proof of them recently.
Oh, I love the word difficult. Recently. Forget recently. Anyone can have skills. Nobody's going to say how long ago you had your skills. Look, I'm standing here, sitting here. I can't tell you how old some of my skills are, but I've got them. I think skills just need just keep happening and keep getting fed and grow and whatever else. What I think would be useful to think about, Juliet, is perhaps editing in a slightly different way that you're familiar with, in as much as if you think of all the digital platforms like Medium, like Huffington Post, they've got their own magazines and they've got their own commissioning editors within those platforms. So that's a position where you could be an editor commissioning articles for something which is digital, which is sort of different from the experience you might have had before being an editor. So it's considering where there are editor opportunities, which may be different from the ones that you had before. But you've certainly got the skills, and if you haven't, you can do a short course and learn them. Does that sort of help a bit?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really about how you approach it. Who do you even approach?
Okay, so if you look at Medium,
because
for
it's
example,
mostly done from inside now.
I don't know that that's true. I think we all fear that, and I think that's what we say to ourselves when it doesn't happen. But if you look at Medium, for example, online, big sort of organization with lots of different branches doing different things, including publications. Sort of different sections, which are mini publications in themselves. Have a look at some of those and have a look at what's missing. And you may say, oh, you don't have a human rights sort of bit, yet you do odd bits on human rights which fit into your charity editor or whatever it is. So you need to do the research to see what's out there, to then come up with an idea that you could do this for them. And wouldn't that be great? Because that would bring in a lot more readers, listeners, and audience. And that's all that people want. So if you can think of a way to bring in money and support and engagement, then they will say, yeah, if you can do that, do it. So it's thinking of things that interest you, finding gaps. You could be an editor of a podcast unit. You've got radio experience, so you could look at an organization that does lots and lots of podcasts and you could edit for them.
Thank you.
Amazing. Right, we're going to go to a couple of people who posted some questions in the chat. Laura, I'm going to attempt to unmute you. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag, but I think you should be able to speak now.
Yeah.
Laura
Hi,
Day.
can you hear
We
me?
can.
Cool. Susan, this has been really inspiring. Thank you. My question was on how to deal with news overwhelm. So you gave really good advice to stay on top of your sort of area of expertise, but sometimes it can get a bit much, especially, you know, trying to sort of condense down ideas. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on filtering or pacing yourself.
Yeah. I think it's noise, isn't it? God, there's so much noise. Everywhere we go, there's noise. I mean, even sitting here, I had to contend with the man doing the hedge. I can't stand noise. And I think all of the stuff that's coming at us is overwhelming. And I think that probably, I would say, which are the bits that you care about, and make yourself a sort of short list of the bits of the news that you're interested in, and sort of tune into maybe programs and newsletters and subscription services about those topics, so that you get interested and engaged in them, which will stop you listening to everything, trying to find one thing that you want to respond to. And it is awfully difficult because it's everywhere. I mean, we're all just junkies. We just listen to everything. And I think the only way to control it is for you to switch off, and a bit like, you know, turning it off.
Yeah.
Just putting on what you want to hear. Is that helpful, or did you mean once you've got all your information, how do you whittle it down to a good idea?
I mean, it's a little bit about that as well. That is something I struggle with too. But I definitely take your point on, you know, kind of filtering through what you care about. But yeah, it's the development, the next part too.
Often when I'm teaching, it's exactly the same thing. People say, I'm overwhelmed, and they come in with a folder full of background information on the subject they want to write about. And I say, close the folder and tell us 3 things that you care about this subject. And they do. And actually, that's it. 3 things. You don't need any more. So the rest, another 3 things for another publication and another story, and another 3 things for another audience and another story. And you've got £1,000 before you've even thought about it. Whereas if you tried to put it all into one, you'd have got one lot of 250. So it's 3 to 5 main ideas in any one story, no more.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Amazing. Right. We're going to go to Annie now. You should be able to chat. You popped a question in the chat.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Yep. Lovely. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for this. It's been so inspiring. So I've been trying to do things a bit differently of late because, like everyone, my work has more or less completely dried up. So I don't know what you think about this, and if you think this would kind of be deemed a bit of a lazy approach possibly, but what I've been doing is I've been cold emailing editors. So I've kind of gone through publications that I've wanted to write for and haven't written for before, and I've sent them very tailored emails and chatty emails, but I've the kind of the angle of the email is basically just, are they accepting pictures from freelancers? And I wasn't sure whether you thought that would kind of be construed as a bit, because I haven't pitched anything specific.
Well, I think I did mention this right at the beginning. To be very blunt with that one, and I think sometimes I can be too blunt, so apologies if it's too blunt. If I was an editor and I get a letter saying, can I write for you? I need to know what it is. I need to ask the question, what would you like to write for us? And what's relevant to our readers? Mm-hmm. So I would think that if you're going to pitch to anyone you haven't worked for before, that you come up with a story that they, in response, say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. That's incredible. My readers would love it. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you've got to understand who that reader is and what sort of things they care about, which means reading that media kit and understanding the demographics and only pitching a story that's topical, and also considering that if it's a magazine in print, that it won't come out for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So I would say absolutely stop writing emails to editors and saying, do you take freelancers or pitches? Come up with some editors who represent publications whose readers you identify with, whose subjects you're interested in, listen hard to the news, read newsletters, come up with a unique angle because you heard something or you've read a new survey, and the response you want from the editor is, I didn't know that. And once you get that response from an editor, the chances are they then say, oh, this is interesting. Who is this person? Oh, okay, yes, I'd like 800 words, please, by Monday week, whatever. So you have to give them something. You can't give them nothing. Does that help?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate that.
A pleasure.
Amazing. Right, we're going to try and go to Jenna next, who had submitted a question in advance. Jenna, are you there?
Yeah, hi. So I've just started out freelancing. I've got my first commission this week, so quite excited about that. But my problem is that I was a staff reporter for about 5 years, but those websites either closed or behind a paywall, so it's really hard to find links, here are examples of my work when I pitch to editors. Is there anything you recommend?
Yes, I think so. I read your question and you actually elaborated slightly further because you said that you were a press officer for a wildlife conservation charity.
Yeah, the RSPB.
Yeah. Oh, even better. So can I can't assume, but do you still want to write about that sort of subject, or do you want to write about something completely different, or can you write about that subject?
Well, it just depends. I'm interested in loads of different things just as part of my problem because I haven't really narrowed down my pitch. There's so many different things, and kind of picking 3 subjects and sticking to them is a whole process I need to go through. But it's just every time I'm kind of pitching, the stuff I'm pitching at the moment is not really to do with the RSPB. It's more kind of relevant to my previous journalist background.
Okay, I can't answer that directly because I don't know what you're pitching. But I run sort of pitch clinics. We have small groups of 6 people and we all share ideas and feedback and develop ideas. What I would be saying to you if you came to me with that question, I would say, in order to get in with a particular publication, I would sell your expertise first. So when you say you've been working for 5 years or whatever as a press officer for a wildlife conservation charity, I would say that if your story was anything to do with conservation, loosely as you like, if your pitch then said, for 5 years I was writing for the wildlife conservation charity, that would make the editor more likely to take your story than not. So I would start with selling stories that you can support with your expertise, if you like. Because
I don't think I explained. So I worked for regional newspapers and B2B. I've only been a press officer for the last year. It's just those stories I can't send links to. So do I send PDFs of the stories?
Sorry, I misunderstood slightly. Okay, so when you say you can only send PDF, I have to say that, and I may be wrong, and some of the editors on the panel may correct me, but not a lot of editors have an awful lot of time to read people's links or portfolio. I would, from now on, make sure that you have a selection of things either on your website or on a platform like Contently, where you can post up lots of different things that you've written. Yes, of course, you could send a PDF to an editor. Just a link. You just say, this is something I've written, so you can see the way I research or the subject, how I dealt with it or how I investigate or whatever else. Is that what you're asking me? How to send these things to an editor? How to
No, I don't have any
send
live links because the newspaper closed or it's behind a paywall. So I don't have any. Okay.
It really, really doesn't matter. If you've got an idea, then you simply say, I worked for a B2B for however many years, and they're all behind a paywall. These are the subjects I covered. If I was an editor, that would be enough for me. I don't need to see that story. So be reassured. Don't worry about something that you can't do anything about. Sorry if I misunderstood the question at the beginning.
No, sorry, I wasn't very clear. Thank you so much. That's really helpful and encouraging.
Yeah, no, absolutely would echo that. I think people sometimes worry too much about how much time editors will have to look at things. But I think anyone who's on this panel who's done some editing before will know that you definitely don't have time to look through loads of clips. So definitely something not to panic about. Right, we're going to go to a couple more, see how many we can get through, because I know we've only got about 5 minutes left. We're going to go to Yvette Custer next, who posted a question in the chat. You should be able to speak now. Do you want to give it a go?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. Jolly good. Hi. So my question is essentially, how much time would you spend trying to pitch to one particular editor? The situation I'm in at the moment is there's this one editor I'm desperate to write for, but I sort of feel like I'm just annoying her a bit, and I don't want to just, I mean, do you think I should just kind of keep at it or pitch the same ideas somewhere else? Because sometimes I sort of feel like, I mean, at what point would you give up, or would you just regularly keep pitching sort of every week? What I'm asking is sort of how much time, I suppose, would you dedicate to one particular place?
Well, I don't know if my answer is controversial. I just know what I tell everybody, and it sort of seems to work. And the editors who are listening to me may say, oh, she shouldn't do that, or whatever. So I'm going to say it anyway. But I think you should be pitching one idea to at least 6 different outlets who are not in competition with each other at the same time, with slightly different experts, slightly different case studies, slightly different angle in terms of the audience you're talking to. One newspaper, one magazine, one online, one in Canada, one in Australia, whatever else it is. There's no point in trying to just, focus on one editor who you quite rightly say may well get irritated if you keep pestering them. If they want something, they will come back to you pretty quickly. It may come back to you in a year, but they still will come back to you if they want it. So I would say don't pester editors, though I'm going to contradict myself again, because I'm going to say I had one client who said, I sent an editor a pitch, she ignored me. I sent it a month later, she ignored me. 3 months later, I sent it again, and she said, what a good idea. Yes, I'll commission that, as if she hadn't seen it in the first place. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I certainly wouldn't pitch every week to the same editor. Okay. Leave them alone. Leave them alone.
Thank you.
Amazing. Right. We're going to see if we can get one or two really quickly, because I know we're almost at time. Bhavani, I'm going to attempt to unmute you now. You had a question in the chat. Do you want to see if you can speak now?
Yeah, hi Susan, this is really encouraging and helpful, thank you. I know most of your advice has been geared towards freelance writers, but I wondered if you had any tips for journalists in radio or TV. I kind of rely heavily on newsrooms to book us for shifts, and editors' work's completely dried up during the pandemic, and the future's not looking optimistic.
I think I have to say not really. Because I only know the principles, as you might know them, that editors are looking for journalists for shifts, and the only thing you can do is be proactive and ask and make your skills and experience known. I don't think there's anywhere central where you can sort of say, here's I think Jen might answer that question better than me.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably a lot of the principles that you've talked about already probably do kind of cut across both to a certain extent. I think it is a certain amount of kind of putting yourself out there and relying on that experience. I mean, I haven't kind of pitched for any broadcast shifts in a while, but I have had success in the past where I've been doing it from cold calling. So finding the right editor and kind of putting myself out there. And that's also not to say that you can't kind of pitch individual video stories as well. I mean, I've seen a couple of funding call outs recently. I put a few in my newsletter today around kind of funding for audio kind of productions or people looking for audio pitches. So don't feel that you can't pitch a story as, say, a freelance writer would. So I definitely would say to kind of look into where you could either do that as pitching a video story or finding funding to do something like that, and not seeing it as just a shift thing, if that makes sense. Even if it's a combination of I can write some words and provide you with this video, kind of using the skills you have to kind of make yourself stand out, if that helps.
And I would also add, perhaps, are you part of any groups on Facebook like Sound Women?
No.
Yeah, well, you see, there's lots of groups that, some of us run and that specialist journalism areas have, and Sound Women are pretty good at sort of saying, help, we need somebody for next Friday or whatever. So join that one, and that might offer you some work that you hadn't seen elsewhere.
Absolutely, would echo that. There's quite a lot of different Facebook groups out there for anything, and that's the place where people tend to go for the last minute kind of, I need someone tomorrow. Fab, we'll take one last question from Julia, and then we'll wrap up. Julia, you had a question. I'm just trying to unmute you. Here we go. Do you want to give it a go?
Hi, hello all. It's just really, at the moment, obviously everyone's cutting budgets and quite clearly they are running out of money. Is there any advice if the editors want to cut rates?
Okay. The thing is, Julia, hi. Nice to
Hi.
see you. I have to comment when it says everyone's cutting budgets and everybody's doing this and the other. Not everybody is. Some people are. And I think we have to make a decision whether we carry on working for the people that are, or we say, no, I don't want to, you know, undercut what I'm worth, or I'm not interested in you having to save money. I want to carry on working. So there's two ways of dealing with it. Either you accept because you like the publication or the work that you're getting, or you say, no, I'm going to go elsewhere. But what I think is not right is that across the board, everybody's cutting everything. Things are changing, which is bringing me back right to the beginning. Things are changing. The things that we're familiar with are no longer the same. And the guy that said to me, I've been writing for the same publications for 15 years, and this is the first time in my entire career that everything's dried up, I think sums it up. Go elsewhere. We can't carry on working for people who can't pay. We can't carry on working with people who, you know, have got such small budgets. And we don't know that they're not making money elsewhere with their advertising and everything else. Anybody can be exploited in this situation. And I think we've got to stand up for ourselves and only work for people who, you know, pay what the going rate is, or what was always the going rate with them. And no, I would not take less. In fact, I would ask for more. And that's all there is to it. We've got to stand together on this and, you know, be a strong front.
Great, thank you.
Amazing. Right, I think we'll wrap it up there because I know we've gone slightly over, but I think I can speak for everyone when I say that that was amazingly helpful, Susan. Thank you so much for your time. Quickly before we all go, just to say thank you to Susan, who's been providing the platforms for us to be able to do these. And also we've posted a link to Susan's website in the chat, so if you're interested in getting more advice from Susan, you can head over to there and contact her and find all of her contact details. I'm just going to pass over to you really quickly, Hilly, because I think you've got some info on our next events.
Yes, thank you very much, Susan. I think you've given us all the rocket fuel up our backsides that we all need in this confusing sort of flippy floppy time. Thank you so much. Very inspiring, as everybody said. Just to tell you all, thank you for coming. Next week we've got a fantastic event. Have we got Women for You, which is our summer party alternative panel quiz chaired by Jo Brand, no less, and with some fantastic, it's journalists against comedians, and we've got a fantastic lineup of very funny women, and we're going to be sharing some of the proceeds of that with the Fawcett Society, who I'm sure you all know about, and at the moment are doing amazing research into what the effect is on women, particularly of COVID. After that, if you're interested in health and science journalism and generally how the whole COVID story has been reported, the following week on the 9th of July, we've got some of the best science and health writers and editors in the country, from the FT, New Scientist, Guardian, talking about the challenges of reporting this story, and you'll be able to ask them questions as well about how you feel the media coverage has played out. And then later on in July, the next thing we've got lined up is some sessions with Twitter. Twitter are going to tell us all about how to stay safe on the platform, beat the trolls, and also to tell us lots more of the stuff that Susan touched on about using Twitter as a fantastic free research and communications tool. So please do join us. If you're not a member, it's only £45 a year, 30 I think if you live outside London. And these events, if you're a member, are only £3. So we'd love to see you again. And thank you very much, and thanks Jen for your absolutely brilliant emceeing as always. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Thank you so much, Susan.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
Bye-bye.